I mean the grandparents, the parents, and their children, and the uncles and on down. Because they had no other resources to go to, and they said, we're just going to take this and we're going to hold on to it with everything we've got. It makes sense, it's clear, it's lucid. The English that's used, the style that's being used is easy for anyone to comprehend. We're going with this. And they just held on it. They just held on to it. And that's a testament to their knowledge. And that's a testament to Imam Ibn al-Naqib al-Masri, rahimahullah. Another alim that died was Shihabuddin Ahmed ibn Muhammad al-Shiraji, who was a Hanbali judge. Salah ad-Din Abu Safa al-Safadi in 764AH. Shamsuddin Abu al-Faraj ibn Qudama al-Maqdisi, who'd been taken prisoner by the Tatars and later escaped. Jalaluddin Abu Hafs al-Anbari. Sidi Muhammad Wafa al-Masri, a major Maliki scholar and head of the Shadhiliya Tariqa in his time. All of these ulama died 765AH. You then had Burhanuddin ibn Qayyim, who was the son of Ibn Qayyim al-Jawziyah. You had Sitt al-Arab al-Musnida, who was a great female scholar who died in 767AH. Musnida means not just someone who's memorized the Musnad, but they've memorized over 100,000 ahadith. So this sister, having the name Sitt al-Arab, means the lady chief over all the Arabs. This was her name. Sitt al-Arab al-Musnida, scholar of the Musnad, scholar of the narrations, memorized at least 100,000 ahadith. I have said this before and I say it again. If you look in history under chapters of du'afa and mawdu'at, chapters of weak and fabricated ahadith, you won't find in there a woman categorically being classified as a liar or a fabricator of hadith, or categorically classed as weak because of memory. Our general understanding of the females were that the females had and have a stronger memory than the men for memorizing people, their lineages, and their family, and so forth. And it's because of this you have this plethora of female scholars that were there. All the other ulama include Afifuddin Abu Muhammad al-Yafi'i, who was a major Shafi'i scholar. Abdul Wahhab ibn Ahmed al-Dimashqi, who was a major Hanafi scholar. Now, at this time, the Hanafis started coming more into Damascus. So they'd been in Central Asia. And as the Mu'tazila began to collapse within the Hanafis, because they started to be ran out of the Hanafi domains, some of the Hanafis began to come into Damascus and other areas. Now, Damascus, then and now, the dominant creed that's taught throughout the urban cities is the Ash'ari creed books. So the Hanafis became Ash'aris in that area. That's why you'll find of all the different Hanafis you'll meet, that's the only time you will meet Ash'ari Hanafis. And so you will see this difference when people say that are from Central Asia coming from that background, and they go and study in Sham, they notice some slight differences in the ways that the Hanafis who are Arabs, who are Ash'aris from Damascus, how they explain the creed. For example, if someone studies and they say, okay, what are the 14 core attributes? The 14 attributes that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gives in the Qur'an to show the difference between him and a false god. What are those 14 main attributes? Hanafis who are Ash'ari say there aren't 14, there's 13. Some semantic difference. But you'll notice that. So you'll look in the books and say they've got 13 listed here and not 14, of course. Well, Hanafis are Maturidis. Well, all of them except for these. So the position for Hanbalis and Hanafis that are Maturidis is 14 attributes. But for those who are Ash'aris, they say the attribute of creation comes under Allah's power. So we don't see that as a separate attribute. Whereas the Hanbalis and Maturidis say, yes, it is. It's a separate attribute. This is semantics. Do they all accept the ayat? Yes. Do they all accept that it's an attribute? Yes. But it's the dispute of how it's understood and explained. And so looking at the books of great Ash'aris, for example, Abdul Ghani al-Maydani, He is one of the great commentaries on the Tahawi text. He's an Ash'ari. Ash'ari Hanafi. You look at the Al-Attar family. They're Hanafis, but they're Ash'aris. The Al-Khursa family. They're Hanafis, but they're Ash'aris. Right? Sheikh Muhammad Fuad al-Barazi, who I learned from, he's a Hanafi, but he's an Ash'ari. And the differences will be slight, but you'll be able to see them. Right? Differences that you will notice. Like, for example, some of them, when you speak to them about, say, the household of the Prophet ﷺ, by household I mean his parents, his grandfather, or his uncle, they hold a position that is diametrically opposed to that which is in this room. Diametrically opposed to the position of most people in this room that I'm sitting in talking today. And I won't mention it because I don't want to cause a controversy again, because I just mentioned it last time. And there was green wood stacked up outside with ropes. I just mentioned it. I didn't even quote it. I just mentioned it. But the reason why I state it is because if you go and study someplace, you need to realize that those people there are just as dedicated to the Hanafi madhab as you, but the Ash'aris. And so you're going to be looking to read books like Aqa'id al-Nasafi, Maturidi scholar, great, wonderful scholar. Aqa'id al-Nasafi, no dispute. But they're going to be reading to you from the commentary of Sa'aduddin al-Taftazani, who's what? An Ash'ari. An Ash'ari. They're not going to be reading to you from Al-Bazdawi, who's a Maturidi. And when you look at the commentaries side to side, you're going to see some differences. That's normal. That's normal. But I say this because if somebody plans on going and studying, do not make the assumption that everyone must think exactly like you and everyone's going to be exactly like the Maturidis of Central Asia. They defended this religion. They upheld the Hanafi method when it just wasn't being upheld. There wouldn't be a Hanafi method if they didn't. That can't be disputed. They're the champions of that method. They are. But those that came westward took on that creed because why? There were no teachers at all to teach it. And the laity that came to them had no teachers at all to teach it. So what could they do? They went to the books of the Ash'ari creed, al-Barahin and these other documents. And so the Hanafis of Damascus, you will find them in the same way. Further to this, you have Ibn Sheikh al-Salamiyya, Hanbali scholar of Cairo, Muwafaq al-Din al-Hajjawi, chief judge of Cairo, Zainuddin Abu al-Faraj al-Dimashqi, brother of Ibn Qayyim al-Jawziyya, Abu al-Muhasin Yusuf al-Mardawi in 764AH. You also find Ibn Qadi al-Jabal, who was a Hanbali judge, Ahmed ibn Muhammad al-Shirazi, who is the author of Al-Maqsad al-Arshad. Now this is an important point. In this time and before, in the early generations, particularly starting from the third, scholars among the four schools were very particular on writing biographical literature about who the different scholars were within their school. So if you look at, say, the biographical literature like Tabaqat al-Hanabila, Dhayl Tabaqat al-Hanabila, As-Suhab al-Wabila, Al-Maqsad al-Arshad, Mukhtasar Tabaqat al-Hanabila, and other books all put together, that shows you about 400,000 scholars from Ahmad ibn Hanbal up until now from the Hanbali school. That's not the layman, that's just the scholars, right? The Hanafis compiled similar literature. The Shafi'is compiled similar literature. The Malikis compiled similar literature, these biographical notices, so people would have historical literature on the different types of mujtahids, who these scholars were, what they did, and what they represented. Because it was important to know, from a legal standpoint, who these different ulama were. So this alim wrote Al-Maqsad al-Arshad, which is a latter day biographical notice on the Hanbali scholars. But other scholars were alive writing Hanafi textbooks on who they were. You have Abu al-Walid al-Gharnati, who was a Maliki judge. Tajuddin Abdul Wahhab ibn Ali al-Subki, who was a Shafi'i judge. Tajuddin al-Subki was considered one of the greatest ulama of his time. So great was his stature that when he became chief judge in Damascus, the actual people came out to meet him. And you may see this in your life, that you meet someone who's a sheikh or an alim. And it's not just that other sheikhs and ulama love them, but that the basic people love him as well. And you don't always find that in sheikhs and ulama, because sometimes the ulama status will be so high, some people won't be able to fully appreciate him because they don't understand what he's saying, his way of speaking, his terminology. They know that he's one of the ulama and they love him, but it's not the same connection. And sometimes you'll meet an alim or hear of an alim like Tajuddin al-Subki, where the people love him as well. And the people say, we want him to stay as our qadi in this district until he dies. Right? That is an example. Tajuddin al-Subki, rahimahullah, is such an example. Another alim that died, now Tajuddin al-Subki died 761AH. Shamsuddin Abu Abdullah al-Zarkashi, he died in 772. Some authorities say 774. Imam al-Zarkashi, I mentioned before, Abu al-Qasim al-Khiraqi, rahimahullah, he was the student of Imam Salih al-Baghdadi, who was the student of Imam Ahmad. Imam Abu al-Qasim al-Khiraqi wrote a book called Al-Mukhtasar, the Summation. 400 commentaries have been written on that book. Imam al-Zarkashi was one of those commentators. And Imam al-Zarkashi was an Egyptian. And Zarkashi was known for, because I've read that book, and he will take all of the positions that there are, because he's a mujtahid mutlaq fil madhab. He'll gather all the positions that there are, put them under one heading, and then he will slowly begin to unfold everything. I'm sorry, he's a mujtahid murajjih, excuse me. So as a preferential mujtahid, he'll gather everything together and then start to unfold it and say, okay, this belongs here, this belongs here, this belongs here. And he'll slowly begin to put the pieces together. And by the time you finish the chapter, let's say on wudu, not only do you have a greater understanding of wudu or what have you, but you understand why there are differences with all the aqwal and all the differences. You can see why. Another one is Sirajuddin Umar ibn Ishaq ibn Ahmed al-Ghaznawi al-Hindi, who's a Hanafi judge in Egypt. Now he actually came down from India, and he's originally from Azerbaijan. He's one of the big Hanafi ulama from Azerbaijan. He's actually from there. And he was such a great scholar that he actually had to be sent from where he was at to Egypt to be able to compete amongst all the Shafi'is, because he was greater than everyone else in his local township in his area. And so the Hanafis of Egypt said, well, we have no one to compete with the Shafi'is. Can you send someone? He said, yes, we'll send Imam al-Ghaznawi. We'll send him down. And so they sent him, and he more than held his own. And so he gained respect, because the ulama, when people need fatwa, they're looking for someone to take fatwa from. And so he was there. Now this particular alim, as I said, he came from Azerbaijan al-Hindi. What you'll also find later, and you may want to note this just for later, is that when you look at a lot of the latter day hadith scholars, a lot of them will have the last name as Sindhi, because in the last 300 years and more ago, the big ulama of hadith, big ulama, were from Sindh. They were considered, in many accounts, as some of the people that preserve the science of hadith. Who can dispute the commentary Awn al-Ma'bud? Who can dispute Muhammad Hayat al-Sindhi, the great Sindhi alim? Who can dispute that alim? He came there, and the Hanafis said, we declare you the mufti of Makkah al-Mukarramah for the Hanafis. He hadn't even properly set his bags down or anything. His respect was that great. And these aren't, because a lot of people say, well, you know, the people, the ulama that aren't Arab, they don't know anything. No, these are Arabs. Dyed in the wool, Ismaili, from the household of the Prophet Ismail alayhi salam, dyed in the wool, brown Arabs. And they said, we declare you the mufti of this area. He wasn't even an Arab.